healthy in terms of psychology, I would say, because one can look themselves in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm doing my best and I'm going to do my best today, and the rest is not up to me, tiny little individual among 7 or 8 billion other individuals, and on a very small, tiny planet called Earth, among the billions of trillions and much more infinity number of planets in billions and trillions of galaxies and solar systems and so forth. So we need to be humble enough to know where we are and what we stand at, and but at the same time say, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And, guide me, God, into whatever you think I should be doing. So, and sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't get it right. The poem, 4 lines of a poem that Judith read is from a poet by name Mahmoud Darwish, who happens to be premier Palestinian national poet. And he's my idol, if you want. I write poetry, and maybe I will read to you some of my poems, my own poems. Let me start with this very short one, which I wrote in 2004, so 20 years ago. Thoughts of life and death, past, present, and yet to be. Somehow, somewhere, sometime, yearning to understand the eternal questions, looking to touch the mind of God, so distant, so powerful, so amazing, but hidden within each of us. Perhaps all the secrets of life are there to see in a child's eye, in a single cell, or in a kiss. This was titled Contemplation. Then another short one titled Purpose, also written about 20 years ago. We can help without interfering in the fate unfolding, not to fashion a destiny, neither to act in enmity, but to enjoy and aid nature's evolving cascade, not to breach, neither to beseech, to act without destroying, to build without obstructing. Looking inward is key to future living free. Aid the natural blooming of life's miracles growing and unfolding a better future for every living creature. And here's the third one that is titled, When I Die, Bury My Ashes in My Town. Joining my memory with that of beloved soil that gave us life, education, and love in Palestine, under the uncompromising sun and the sky that tells no lies in Palestine, where we learned to plow rocky soils and dance the debka, away from the magic of Nai, sway to the magic of Nai and Oud, Fairuz and Kulthum, mother's tender words inseparable from a meal, Zayt and Za'atar in Palestine, where we worshipped in mosques, church, and olive groves, where we learned to live together every day, even when not knowing it would be our last day in Palestine, where we hated the occupation, the land confiscation, the US-funded army, where we mourned friends lost, where we resisted by staying, living, and loving. And when we could not stay, we stayed connected with all that was good and worthy of our love of Palestine, where we got to school dodging bullets, checkpoints, walls, كيف المحسوم اليوم? That's Arabic. How is the checkpoint today? In the refugee camps, that loneliness of the ghurba, that means diaspora or exile. We still married, had children, laughed, cried, lived, and loved. We taught our children to kick the ball, to say ahlan wa sahlan, and to believe that our ashes join a million spirits of ancestors who lived and loved, and children who live and love. We still teach them, like 20 impossibles. We shall return to Palestine, and our children will live in freedom in Palestine. I dabble in poetry because it's a form of relieving tension, if you want, relieving our mind from the horrors that we say daily around us. This week, we're really reaching crescendo of incredible horrors. Just this morning, Israel bombed people sheltering, refugees sheltering in the UN school, killing mostly children. 80% of the victims are children whose body parts were flown all about. And there's no hospitals to take care of the injured. There's basically the hospitals have been bombed. In normal circumstances, if you want to call them that, one would go crazy. One would join a mental institution just to be able to cope with this, or to cope with the idea that 9 Israeli soldiers gang raped a Palestinian prisoner with a broomstick, and eventually he died from his internal injuries. And when the Israeli police detained them briefly, Israeli ministers went to the place that they were detained and protested with many right-wing Israelis, and the government was forced to release those 9 soldiers because of the public pressure to basically protest for the right to torture Palestinian prisoners. And so far, more than 50 Palestinian prisoners have been killed under torture in Israeli jails. You cannot cope with these things, the images, I won't show you any images or video because, well, you know why. If you want, I can share later if you send me email. But we must keep going, and we must somehow find that inner, I don't know what to call it, inner light, inner strength to say, I am still human. I'm not what they say I am. I'm still human. That's the most difficult part. It's to stay human. To stay human in the middle of a genocide is very, 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 very hard, unbelievably hard. But, we have to do it. And people look up to us. They look up to me because they claim, well, he has a PhD, he was professor at Yale and Duke University, he must know what he's doing. So let us ask him. And I'm like, I'm not sure I can offer help. I need help sometimes myself. So we must, in my humble opinion, at least, for the sake of our children, keep our strength. And where can we draw strength from? I tell you a quick story of one time we brought a bunch of children to Connecticut and New England from a refugee camp here. And we were taking them around to do the Debka dance. That's a Palestinian traditional indigenous dance. And as we traveled around, we went on one trip from Connecticut to Vermont. We were in two vans. I was driving one van, and a friend was driving the other van. And next to me in my van was an adult minder for the children, and the children were in the back. And we were talking a bit depressed, if you want. And because we were in the midst of another horror, which was 2000 to 2005, when Israel killed hundreds of children. And that was 2003 is when they were in the US, or 2002. But anyways, as we drove the car and we were talking in negative terms about politics and politicians, and, as you mentioned, the ridiculous shows of the US of supporting genocide and ethnic cleansing. One of the girls taps me on the shoulder and says, "Do not worry, Uncle Mazin, Palestine will be free." And the guy next to me, his face turned yellow, like contorted and really in pain. So at the next gas station, I stopped him to ask him why. I thanked her basically and said, "Thank you for encouragement." He said, "Well, you don't understand. This girl, they killed her mother a few weeks ago, and we brought her to the US so that she can forget this, and we don't mention it. But for her to be more optimistic than you and I, she made me ashamed." I'll stop here, and if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mazin. My name is Matt, and I'm myself and Kenichi. Are you here?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I'm here.
Hey, Kenichi.
Go ahead.
So we're gonna
go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna be guiding the conversation. So I just wanted to introduce myself. Thank you for your words and your poetry, and your processings are a gift for us to connect to ourselves and to the world around us. So thank you for sharing those and grounding yourself in these moments. I'm particularly curious. I mean, I love the idea of staying human. There's an artist I follow, a musician. He has a whole album that he just released recently called "Stay Human," and it's really powerful. Just goes to the depths of what it means to be human, but also the joys. And so I hear you kind of talking about the youth that were able to experience the joy and the pain at the same time while living in occupation. And I guess I'm curious what the current after Ishmael was murdered this week in Tehran. I'm curious. I believe that change comes from bottom up, but a lot of people like to put it as like, oh, we got the top leader or we got a leader, and so change is now going to be sweltered or minimized. And so I'm curious how the spirit of the people are after this, or do they? Is it still? How's the spirit of the people right now?
Well, Ismail Haniyeh is the political leader of Hamas. He's not involved in the resistance himself. He's a political leader. was exiled living in Qatar for the time being. His family is mostly in Gaza, except his wife and one of his daughters. And his children in Gaza were massacred with his grandchildren. 60 members of his family were intentionally killed by the Israeli army before they assassinated him. He was a moderate leader of Hamas who believed also in Palestinian unity. So he had good relationship to all Palestinian factions, those who agree with him ideologically and those who disagreed with Hamas ideology. For example, even the Marxist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine was a very good working relationship with him and friendly with him, and they mourned him as did all Palestinian factions and all sectors of Palestinian society. Let's be very clear, Israel assassinated him because they couldn't keep up the charade that they want to return the hostages and that they want to finish this. Israel doesn't want to finish this. Ismail Haniyeh, as I said, was the moderate within Hamas. He was willing to accept conditions that no other Palestinian leader will accept from Israel for ending the genocide that's ongoing in Gaza. So assassinating him effectively, Israel is sending a message, we really don't care, we don't want a deal. You know, how do you negotiate and you kill your chief negotiator, you know? That doesn't make sense. So anyways, yeah, so basically what his killing will do, like the killing of previous political leaders in Palestine, and we have to realize there have been thousands, not hundreds even, of political leaders who were assassinated or killed. Even leaders of nonviolent resistance in Palestine were targeted and killed, or in my case, imprisoned. So Israel doesn't want any leader of Palestinian, regardless of what their political views, because they don't want any Palestinians. They want to liquidate the Palestinian cause, and they want to liquidate Palestinians because we're the indigenous people and they're the colonizers, and having us hang around is not healthy for the colonizers. So this is why, but in terms of its impact, of course, it achieves the opposite of what Israel claims it achieves. They use terms like decapitate Hamas. Sorry, you know, you kill one person, you have dozens more that are much happy to join for revenge, for whatever, for filling the vacuum. And this was seen historically every time Israel assassinated, even Hamas, I would say, every time Israel assassinated people in Hamas, Hamas only grew stronger. So it is not, Israel knows this, by the way, even Israeli heads of intelligence tell Netanyahu this, and they quibble with Netanyahu because they say this is not a way to get our Zionist objectives of clearing the land. We're just creating more resistance. So genocide also creates resistance. Unless you manage to liquidate all 15 million Palestinians in the world, that's another possibility or attempt, but for the time being, it's any rational human being sees that these assassinations are meant, actually intended, not even side effect. They are intended to start regional wars and start more resistance so that Netanyahu keeps out of jail and the Israeli public keeps clapping for him just like Congress claps for him.
Thank you, Mazin. I join also with Matt to really thank you for taking out the time and space to address us today. And yes, your presence and your voice are a gift to us. I do have a question, but if I may reserve it till a little bit later. I wanted to give other people a chance. Dr. David, you had your hands up for a while, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mazin, I want to also say what a privilege it is and how much I appreciate your spending time with us. And I just wanted to say that I am in complete awe of your courage and your dedication. And I wonder, where do you draw your strength from? How in the world are you able to do what you do and to carry on in the face of such terrible strife?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm not sure I draw strength from, I'm not sure I'm that strong to begin with. I think, we each have that struggle, and we each have our cross to bear. Sorry to use that metaphor, but we each try to do what we can. But I do have some tricks of the trade, if you want, for keeping my sanity, which is the closest thing I can say to drawing strength, is to keep our sanity. And one is to stay always busy. And Judith can testify to this from her time around me and staying with us for a while. I don't sit down, and I don't spend a lot of time doing whatever. I just stay busy. Staying busy at least keeps you reflecting. At the end of the day, for example, when I go to bed at 12 or midnight or at 1 o'clock, I say, hey, I've done what I could today, and here's what I have done. Here's the things that I have achieved. And tomorrow I'll try my best to keep up, if my health keeps up with me, my physical abilities keep up with my determination, mental determination. The second trick, I might say, maybe it's not applicable to everybody, but my scientific background and reading a lot and liking to read history and so forth gives me an understanding of history that's wider than what they usually teach us in school. And the closest I can recommend for you is to read like Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States, or his book titled You Can't Be Neutral in a Moving Train. These kinds of books, and Khalil Gibran's The Prophet and others, they allow me to think that, the world is wider. There are smarter people than I am, and, I should not, I'm doing my best, and I should not fret too much. This is a kind of another trick I use, is to read a lot, read poetry, write poetry. These are things that help. But staying active is the most important.
Well, thank you. God bless you, and more power to you.
Thank you.
God.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Dr. Mazin. Question that's really been bothering me. And we have some very great, strong Jewish voices Jewish organizations here in the United States, like the Jewish Voice for Peace, Not My Name and stuff. I keep hoping and wanting the Israeli people to do something about this slaughter, but I don't know where they are on this. I'm wondering if you can share that.
Well, I mean, the Israeli public is like the American public. I would say the vast majority of the US public, as the vast majority of the Israeli public, is not partaking of the atrocities, but is apathetic. Apathetic meaning they don't give a shit, you know, and they want to just live their lives. They want to enjoy themselves. They want to go to parties and let some other people deal with the problem. They pay their taxes, etc. They don't realize that that's what Howard Zinn talked about in his book, You Can't Be Neutral in a Moving Train, you know? When there's genocide going on, like in Nazi Germany, German public that was apathetic was actually more dangerous than the Nazis who committed the atrocities, because it allows the atrocities to continue. So I think this is a problem that we face globally and not just here locally. I would say even the Palestinians, I would simply argue that there's still a majority of Palestinians who are apathetic, even though their brothers and sisters and relatives of theirs are being killed. This apathy is a human disease that I'm not sure, maybe you guys can help me figure out how we can cure it. But anyways, and then of course there are the saddest violent Israelis, perhaps 5 to 10% of the population. That is includes some really fascist right-wing people who don't have any compunction about using their M16 gun to shoot a child in the head or in the back of on the back as the child flees from them, or to torture prisoners and things like that. I'm not sure what the cure for those groups are. I think they should be tried in international courts. They should be arrested, but they are running the government in Israel. All the Israeli government is run by those people. And then there's the other minority, I would say also maybe less than those, maybe 2%. Those are Israelis who have a conscience and who act on their conscience, sort of like the whites who acted to support the civil rights movement and smuggled blacks and on the trains to the north during the slavery period and things like that. And those are a small minority, very important though, because it undermines the logic of tribalism, the logic of whites versus blacks in the case of the US, or the logic of Jews versus Arabs in our case. This is not logic, this is stupid and nonsense. What we have is a racist, apartheid, genocidal, ecocidal and scholasticidal regime that's running our country, and that has no compunction about continuing to murder children every single day with the support of US taxpayers and US weapons and US veto at the UN, as happened just last week. So this is what we face, and hopefully the world will wake up. It was the world waking up on apartheid in South Africa that made the difference. Significant contribution to the difference. I mean, I don't want to belittle of course, the major contribution is still the resistance in South Africa under apartheid. But help from outside with boycott, divestment, sanctions, and others was critical and supportive and important role. So we would like to see the same thing happen here. Our resistance is still critical, but it is also critical to have support from outside. That's why I speak to you, and I speak daily to groups like you. And I go travel like I spoke in Australia and New Zealand and came back last month, etc.
Lisa.
Good morning. It's an honor to hear you. Thank you so much. You basically spoke what I was feeling at the beginning of your talk. It's like to find your voice kind of and find where you're supposed to be and find your purpose. And so I appreciate that because I feel like I'm continually searching, is this where I'm really supposed to be? And so I appreciate that. I've been trying to speak to some Israel families that I know that I feel like they're being given misinformation. And I'm wondering if you have some kind of information. It's like, where can they get information that will give them the truth of what's really going on and give them both the Palestinian information as well as the Israelite information, and somewhere that they can say, oh, I didn't know this was also going on. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I didn't.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, just a very simple website, ongaza.org, ongaza, one word, .org. Has a lot of information. It has also links to news websites and others they can browse, like Palestine Chronicle or International Middle East Media Center or others. They're all present on this website called ongaza.org.
Okay.
I can send some others if you want, if you write me separately, but I think that will cover.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other thing is to suggest to them to join Facebook groups that where people are posting information. If they want a balanced website or Facebook group, there's a group I'm on that has something like 7,000 people on it.
Okay.
A Facebook group called Israelis and Palestinians for Peace.
Okay.
So look it up on Facebook, join it if you want. You can see my posts there. I mean, the moderators sometimes don't allow me to post things that are graphic, what's happening, and they want the more sanitized versions of what exists. But
Yeah.
But it's okay. At least they allow some of our posts through, and some Israelis post some things where we respond to and we explain and we discuss. And it's not easy, but it makes people forced to listen or read at least what the others feel or think or not.
Okay. And it's called Israel and Palestinians for Peace.
Palestinians for Peace.
Sorry, I was talking. Say it again.
Sorry, Israelis and Palestinians for Peace. I will put the link for it in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll put my email address in case you want to send me anything else that you think of. That'd be great. It's hard to talk to them because they've been given so much information of how Israel has been so abused that they can't even get to the point of, well, wait, what about this? And so that's what I'm trying to get them to point about.
Yeah, I mean, other thing is to say, look, you really want to know what's going on? Do you want to discuss with Palestinians? There are Palestinians willing to speak to you. Here is Professor Mazin Qumsiyeh at Bethlehem University. Is Palestinian Christian, certainly not a Hamas member or supporter.
Right.
Afraid of him, he's not going to cut your throat or anything like that.
Yeah.
They basically condition them
Mm-hmm.
with incessant lie after lie that Hamas raped women, that this.
Yeah.
You know, that they conditioned them in many ways that made it very hard for them. So they can talk to us, but if that is too much for them, they can talk to other Israelis. Why not encourage them to talk to groups like Matspin or like PAM or some others? You know, there's some groups in Israel like Zochrot. You know, there I can send them a list on my own website, by the way.
Okay.
There's a whole list of Jewish websites.
Okay.
I can also find that link if you want.
I just put, Mazin, I just put your email address so that anybody who wants to stay in touch with you can sign up for your newsletter.
Yeah, it'd be great if people want to join my newsletter. I send posts sometimes weekly, sometimes more often, depending on whether it's required. But anyways, yeah, I'll put this link to Jewish websites you can also send to them. Predominantly Jewish links or like Jewish Voice for Peace or other groups, you will find them on that link.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. And if
Hey,
people
Reverend Judith.
do not want to put their email in the chat room, they could just email me so that I have your email address.
Okay.
So Lisa and everyone, I just want to say that Mazin's newsletters come with all kinds of links to all kinds of information and videos and things that are really current, and also all those websites he talked about. But also what Mazin does is he has good news, what good people are doing in his newsletter. And it's not a fancy newsletter, to put it mildly. There's no photographs. There's nothing but just a few poems once in a while from Mazin and information and links. It's really powerful. So I hope you all get on it. And also, Mazin, is everyone welcome to PIBS? Monthly, what the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability has achieved every month. Is that open to everybody as well?
Yes, if people are interested to be put on our announcements for those monthly gatherings where we speak about our positive, as Judith said, we're an oasis in the middle of this mayhem. So we speak about our achievements during the month, the children who come to the Botanic Garden, farming we do, the talks we give, the outreach, the visitors we get globally. And by the way, we invite you to come and visit us anytime. If you haven't been to Palestine, it's a must-see country. It will change your life. I don't exaggerate, and this is testimony of everybody who's been here. And this is not simply because it's an important land for the three monotheistic religions, as a so-called Holy Land, but because it really exposes, I think, a lot of our misgivings and so forth, and it clarifies the picture of the world and where our role is. I mean, I am lucky that I was raised here and understood the world very early age. And I didn't succumb to the propaganda that I was fed, whether it's in the US or even here. You know, in the US, by the way, my son went to school in the US, and they're fed a lot of propaganda, and transcending this propaganda, like the propaganda about the US being redeeming force in the world that pushes for democracy, all this stuff is nonsense. Of course, the US, as Martin Luther King said, is the biggest purveyor of violence in the world today. It still is. And when you look at, you know, how they are propping a dictator like Zelensky in Ukraine, who banned elections, but then they attack Venezuela simply because they have good elections and because the CIA appointed person is not able to undergo his coup against the government. And elections that were clearly independent, etc. But this has been happening for decades, for 200 years of US imperialism in the world. And people need to understand the lies they are told about their government. So for the lady who was speaking about Israelis, we should also tackle American misgivings and propaganda and brainwashed minds that are prevailing among fellow US citizens.
As a basically uninformed American before I met you, Mazin, I could totally testify to volunteering at the Palestine Institute as changing my life. Even though I read about apartheid, living under apartheid is a totally different thing. And I think, Mazin, I asked you over and over again the same questions because it didn't compute. Like, what do you mean you can't drive on that road? What do you mean you can't go with me to Jerusalem? Like, things that I know I heard about them before, but when you're actually living it, it's a totally different thing. And also, I want to encourage all of you, if you can, to support Mazin's work and to donate to PIBS, because it's really important to keep the history of Palestine alive. A lot of what the occupation is doing now, I hear from my friends, is like going into like Jenin, bombing the entrance with the beautiful welcome of Jenin sign they love, and then going into their museums and stealing their artifacts. I mean, they really want to just completely get rid of any history of Palestine. And Mazin has an amazing ethnography museum and library of artifacts.
Well, Dr. Mazin, when you were, I just wanted to start by saying when you were emphasizing, in one of the poetries, I'm a human, because my wife and I, we often discuss about Korea and which was called Chosun, years and decades and years and hundreds of years ago. It just reminded me of the people there, how their country have been violated over and over and over and tried to be annihilated, and yet they're still standing. And so my mind immediately went over there. And of course, with the people of African descent, around the globe, as well as the indigenous communities. So thank you for sharing that. My question, Dr. Mazin, is, and I have shared this with Pastor David, I have been approaching both the Old Testament and the Scripture basically very critically lately, very critically. And for instance, in Genesis, we read where God spoke to Abraham, saying that, go to this place, I'm going to give you as an inheritance. And those who curse you, I will curse. Those who bless you, I will bless. And, you know, in my reading of the history of Israel and the formation of Zionism, that seems to be like the bedrock informing their theology, especially for the Christian nationalist Zionists, the white evangelicals who support that kind of theology. And so then I recently am going, you know, reading through Hebrews in the New Testament, and it, you know, we read in the very well-known chapter 11, by faith, Abraham, you know, when he was told to go to a land, he didn't know where he was going, but then he was told to go and receive it as an inheritance. I had to pause and go, wait a minute, is there a trace of, you know, bias here by the Jewish, I believe it was a Jewish writer, by the Jewish writer, you know, drawing from the Old Testament account and assuming that that was God. But for me, hearing, you know, I mean, your human experience and what you embody, reading the history, you know, such like, oh, I read a line not too long ago. So Israel's independence came at the War of Independence. Israel became a nation after the War of Independence of 1948, for instance. And so many Zionists and Christian nationalists will quote that and say, whoa, God's prophecy came into fulfillment there. But when I read this, it came at an expense of such bloodshed and so much killing. I'm like, I had to pause and say, that's not the God I serve and worship. So all this is to say is, as a one who is of Palestinian lineage, how do you navigate through that? Because how do you navigate through scriptures like that?
Yeah. You know, up until a few years ago, I was always puzzled by these holy texts, supposed holy texts, that call for genocide. And I thought, what kind of a God tells people, go kill men, women, and children, even the beasts, don't leave any traces of those Canaanites or Amalekites or whatever to the people of Israel in the Old Testament and the Torah and things like that. I was always puzzled by these things. And I put in the chat a book that will help. It's by Barbara Thiering, who's a professor of theology in Australia. Wrote a book called Jesus the Man, a New Interpretation from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Amazing book, I highly recommend it. It speaks about how we really misunderstand what's in the Bible, because the Bible, the Old Testament, the way it was written so that priests could interpret it, not that common people could take it literally as written. Priests could interpret it and relay the proper message that is supposed to be hidden within this text. And Barbara Thiering actually dissects this very, very clearly with lots of evidence that shows what this is about. And, you know, the problem with fundamentalists, who are usually, by the way, fundamentalists and racists in general, are generally not the most educated people, not the most well-read people. So they tend to just selectively take some things and throw them at you without delving deeper into the issue. And when you start to delve deeper into the issues with them, they just shun you off and say racist things and move on. So they don't want to discuss really theology. If they want to discuss theology, there's lots of books like Barbara Fearing and others. Joseph Campbell, for example, his books on comparative theology and others that can be read. And I would encourage people to read them. But, you know, to answer more directly about this, I mean, you reach a point where with some people, you don't dialogue because it's useless to dialogue with somebody whose entire life is based around mythologies of misinterpretation of their religious holy books and not reading other parts of their holy books or not and realizing the contradictions within their own holy books. The Bible itself has a lot of internal contradictions. For example, in one part it says, you know, Joshua came, obliterated the Canaanites because God told him to obliterate the Canaanites. In the other part of the same book, the Torah, it says that Joshua lived among the Canaanites and even married with the Canaanites, you know. So I don't know which part of that Bible you want to take. And if you are a nice, kind-hearted person, you take that second part. If you're an ugly person, you choose that first part and you say, well, if God told us to kill the Canaanites and the Philistines, who are another kind of Canaanite or another tribe of Canaanites, or the Amaleks, another tribe of Canaanites, well, then we can kill their descendants, the modern day Palestinians, Arabs, you know, might as well. After all, it's the will of God. And those people believe they are going to go to heaven for defending their faith, be it Christianity or Islam. And since we believe our faith is the right faith and these people are infidels anyway, we might as well speed up their delivery to whatever hell they are going to go to. But this is not unique to Zionism, of course. Other, you know, ideologies of racism have used similar language. I mean, if you look at, there are some branches of Wahhabi Islam interpretations and, you know, Islamic State and so forth that used Islam in the same way, or the Crusaders used Christianity in the same way to justify murder and killing and genocides. That happens in human history, and but you cannot deal with those people in the sense that you cannot convince them, because after all, they are God's pious people who know their Bible, who know their Torah or whatever, who know what Jesus wants them to do, to kill the infidels or whatever. So, you know, Bush, when he was murdering Iraqi children, he said God told him that this is a righteous cause to go to war on Iraq, on the Iraqi people. Okay, fine. Am I going to convince George Bush or convince Netanyahu? Netanyahu doesn't even believe in God, but he does believe that God gave him this land. So how can you talk to somebody like that? You know? Somebody who's an atheist, who says this is the heritage of the Jewish people because God gave us this land.
Yeah.
He's an atheist, you know. Herzl was an atheist also.
Mazin, I want to thank you again. I mean, this is a terrific privilege for us to be able to connect with you. Just, you know, it's amazing that we have the technology to be able to do it. And it's also amazing that, you know, that you're willing to give us your time so that we can remain morally tethered to you and to the Palestinian people. before Roy comes on to lead us in communion and close our time, I just want to recognize a local hero of mine who happens to join us today. Elizabeth Robinson is with us, and she's a brilliant scholar and thinker, and used to, with her husband Cedric Robinson, led the Third World Report on television, her late husband. And so thank you, Elizabeth, for gracing us with your presence. It's a joy to see you. Wow. You want to say hello to everybody or what? I'm putting you on the spot. I know.
No, I don't mind being put on the spot on this occasion, David. Thank you. As David knows, I'm not a churchgoer, so I'm sure we have to thank, first of all, Sally Jansen for my presence, and Diane Moore as well, whom I was with last evening, and Sally talked about your work. And for many, many years, I have been talking about a lot of this publicly and elsewhere, certainly privately, but it's probably obscene half the time. So
then make yourself at home.
Keep it real, Elizabeth. It's Rosie. My love to you. Oh, hermana.
Hi, Rosie.
Oh my
God. And what an extraordinary collection of folks. I only know a few of them, but it's enough to say, hey, this fits with David. Sure. The need is just so extraordinary. The vitriol is so awful. And all of your engagement around it is really, really important. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. Well, we are going to conclude our time contemplatively, and Roy, would you take it away?
We come to share communion. In my tradition, it is metaphor, but metaphor that is so pregnant with meaning. I look at the bread and I think of the bread of life given so freely to all of us. We talk about the body of Christ, and I think of the community that we are called to be together. We speak of remembering Jesus who gave himself for us, and I feel in my bones the call for us to give ourselves for others. We take bread and cup, and I think of the basic human need for sustenance and how God provides. And in this moment, all of those images come to me. And so as we take the bread, Jesus broke it and said, "This bread is my body given for you. Whenever you come together as my community, take and eat, that I might be remembered." And so take the bread and eat. After supper, Jesus took the cup and he said, "This cup is the cup of the new covenant in my blood poured out for you. We take this cup in realization of all of the connections that we have. Take and drink. Let's pray. Holy One, we thank you for the pain that you have lovingly inflicted upon us today. As you have challenged us to see the hardships, the grief, the suffering of our siblings far away,
Yes.
whom it would be so easy for us to forget. Thank you for making that brokenness a part of who we are. And thank you for the reminder that your love, your grace overcomes even the power of death, as that little girl in the van so prophetically said when she said, Palestine will be free. Continue to break our hearts and remind us of who we must be and what we must do to be your children. Amen.